Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get this call started. I don't know if everybody can hear me. Okay, great. I'm Natalie Early. I'm the president of Atlas. Atlas is hosting the call for Dr. Brewer. He's going to take over here in a moment and talk about all things back to school and COVID mitigations and anything else. I am here also to say that I'd like to welcome everybody back to the 2021-2022 school year. We're looking forward to a great year. I know it's going to come with its challenges, but I think it's going to be a great year. I think we're set up for a good time this year, and we're going to do the best we can. I wanted to let you guys know that we're going to be doing our membership drive over the next several weeks, and we'd love it if you could join Atlas and become part of the team here. We do a lot for the school. We are doing a breakfast tomorrow with the wellness team at the school, and we're putting it on for the staff and the teachers. They're going to have a pancake breakfast. We helped put some bags together today to welcome the teachers back. And so there's a lot of things that we are going to be doing throughout the school year, and we would love to have parents join us and be part of meeting the teachers and meeting the staff and just being a part of the school and engaging with the kids and the teachers and staff. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out at atlas@dominionhigh.com, and we can answer any questions you have about Atlas. We are the PTO. All right, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Brewer and let him start.
Thanks so much, Mrs. Early, for getting us started tonight. And I do want to thank Atlas and so many of you who volunteered time and resources to prepare for the return of staff members, the faculty and staff return to work tomorrow. And I couldn't be more excited about that. It's obviously been a long time since we've all been together. A lot of us were together this past spring, but it wasn't quite the same, as you can imagine. And it won't be quite the same this time, but we're getting closer for sure. And I just want to thank you. You contributed a lot of things for tomorrow's breakfast. Each staff member is getting a welcome bag with some goodies in it and some nice welcoming gifts. So thank you so much for your contributions there and your support of our faculty and staff as they come back to work. Tonight, what I want to do is present for maybe about 15 minutes. I tend to talk more than I probably should, but I want to give you an overview of our game plan for keeping your Titans safe at Dominion High School during our return to in-person learning. And then after that, I've gotten probably about 20 to 25 questions already that are really good. And I'll answer probably a bunch of them during the presentation that I want to make, but there'll be others that you will think of while I'm presenting. If you would, don't hesitate to start putting it in the chat, but I would encourage you not to hit send while I'm making the presentation. Usually when we do these events, I bring some other staff members along. Tonight I decided I was going to do this solo, mostly because it's a busy time for our team, and they're investing a lot, trying to make sure they're ready for the faculty tomorrow and for your students very soon. So at any rate, I won't be able to monitor the chat right away. So you can just hold your questions and we'll put them in the chat once we get past that presentation piece. That'll be real helpful to me, so that my hope would be by about 7:45 tonight, we've answered every question that you have about COVID-19 mitigation at Dominion High School. Before diving into the layered set of strategies that we're going to use to keep your students and our staff safe from COVID-19, I want to let you know what happened last year. And you might have a perspective about COVID-19's impact at school that needs some context, because last year you received, I don't know, 2 or 3 times a month, once winter athletic programs began in mid-December, all the way through the middle of June, you were receiving maybe as many as 1 email a week, maybe a little bit less than that, from our superintendent of schools Dr. Scott Ziegler, indicating that a COVID-infected individual had been present at Dominion High School. Very little context was attached to those notices, not a criticism, just the reality. What I want you to know is 100% of those cases of COVID-19 were infections that occurred in a family or in the community. 0 transmissions have occurred in the calendar year 2021 on the campus of Dominion High School, to our knowledge. So that gives me significant optimism for the upcoming year. That being said, I recognize that we had 250 students per day in school back in May and June, and we're about to have 1,500 next week. I recognize the vast differences that those 3 or 4 months make when you talk about those staggering numbers. Nevertheless, I feel very confident that we can work together utilizing a layered set of strategies to, again, keep very low and maybe even hit that 0 number again. And I'll be honest with you, my goal for transmission in the building, on the premises, it's 0. That's my leadership perspective about that. We have enough resources at our disposal that should be our goal. We will have a whole bunch of strategies that are in place, and I'll start talking about those in just a moment. Thought there was one more thing I probably wanted to say before we get going on that, and no, I'll dive right in. This is Komai. Thanks for hosting us and helping with the technicals behind the scenes here so I can concentrate, and our staff has been able to concentrate over the past 18 months on what you want to hear from us. So Mrs. Komai is going to share a slide with you. There's nothing really fancy about this slide. Some of you have already seen this slide, but it helps me to stay on point about what I want to say, to answer your questions, to alleviate your concerns. Not everyone in our community is going to choose to get vaccinated, and I understand that, and I respect that. Nevertheless, I do want to encourage every single staff member and every single student who are coming to Dominion High School to get fully vaccinated. I obviously recommend that you are in touch with your physician, your personal physician, your family physician, to make sure that that's medically appropriate for you and your Titan. The statistics about infection rates at the present time for vaccinated versus non-vaccinated individuals are staggering. Over 99% of cases of infection at the current time are for people who are not vaccinated, in around 99%. The rate of infection, those rogue infections for those of us like me who've been fully vaccinated, is roughly 1 in 1,000. 1 in 1,000 people, and it's a little bit lower than that for adolescents. So that's a pretty encouraging set of data. It certainly also suggests in a student body of 1,500, a faculty of almost 250, 300, you know, we could expect to have some infections occur even among the vaccinated, but the vast, vast majority, 98, 99% of the current infections across the Commonwealth are of those individuals who haven't been vaccinated. Every student at Dominion High School is old enough under CDC guidelines to be vaccinated. Again, I acknowledge it's not my role to try to parent your Titan. You know their medical history, you know your family's values. But if we could have 80 to 90% of our students, 95% of our students choosing to get vaccinated, we would have a lot of success coming back to school and not having to worry about transmission of COVID-19 in the building in a widespread manner. So I definitely encourage vaccination. I want to remind you that vaccinations are still being conducted for 1 more week at the Dulles Town Center site. It does close next Tuesday. So with the timing of that, with school starting on Thursday suggests to me if your Titan hasn't been vaccinated at this point in time, I would urge you to do so, unless there's a really extraordinarily compelling reason why that's not advisable for your Titan. And again, I don't want to step on any family values. Those are your choices to make. I just know if we have a high percentage of vaccinated students and we can achieve that in high school, we're going to have a very successful school year. One more perspective about that, and then I'm going to move on. And that is, I know some of the concern is that these vaccinations are still somewhat experimental. They haven't been fully vetted by the scientists, and they've only received contingent approval by the CDC. Nevertheless, one thing I want to point out is our students, your students. For me as a 50-plus-year-old guy, kind of having 18 months of my life, the trajectory of it dramatically altered is not a big deal. My life's pretty stable. I've been doing the same kind of things for about 20 years now, right here in Titan territory, and I plan to do them for another 10, 15, 20. It's not a big deal for me to miss 18 months of my life, but my goodness, it's an awful lot for a teenager. You think about our juniors, our rising juniors. They've been in school for about 6 months, and half of their high school career is now over, and they've been in school for 6 months. And most of them have never been in school in the spring in high school, and they've missed a lot. So I urge the vaccination because I want students in the short term to be able to enjoy their adolescence and all that comes with it. And they only get one shot to do this. So that's my plea. I'll get off that horse now and just say vaccination, it blows away all the other things I'm going to talk about. But it's true that vaccinated individuals in rare cases do get sick. And so we need to have some other layered strategies in place. The next most important thing, and the things I'm going to talk about are prioritized by the science in the order of their importance in terms of us keeping healthy at school. The second most important thing your Titan can do, vaccinated or not, is stay home when they're sick. Now, for 20 years, I've been telling kids to come to school when they're 95%, when they're 90%. You got a little cough, come to school. Not in the last 18 months, and not in the next coming month or 2 or 6 or 9. If you got a little cough, we want you to stay home. We want to make sure we know what that's coming from. So I just encourage you to keep your Titans home when they're ill. And it's so important. Loudoun County Public Schools last year used a formal symptom checker that had you as a parent, along with your adolescent, evaluating and self-assessing their health on a daily basis. What we found is 6 students were not coming to school. And the symptom checker was probably a really effective tool at helping everybody make a good decision in that regard. Nevertheless, we had virtually 0 symptom checkers that weren't passed by students and staff who are coming to school. And so the need for us to utilize the symptom checker, Loudoun County Public Schools had decided there is no longer that need. But there is a need for that self-assessment to still occur. And we would ask you to use the same criteria that you were using last year, those of you who were coming to school. If you have a fever, stay home. If you have a cough, sneeze, or runny nose, stay home. If you have a headache, stay home. Feel better. Thermal cameras, last year, we decided to explicitly take a temperature of every single individual entering the building. I want to tell you, we turned almost no one away because we didn't have people with fevers walking in the building, not guests, not staff, and not students. So we're going to discontinue the explicit staff member taking a temperature of every person walking into the building. And we will now rely on Loudoun County Public Schools' newly installed thermal cameras. There's a thermal camera at our main entrance where students enter the building, and we'll be able to monitor to see if somebody's walking in with a temperature that really is of concern. We'll be able to locate that student and make sure that they are cared for and get home if they need to get home. One of the big questions that has come up, many of you asked it in preparation for the meeting tonight, is distancing in the classroom. How are we going to manage distancing? The answer to that in a full classroom The answer to that question is we're going to do the best we can. We're going to try to achieve 3 feet of distance. We're going to achieve as much distance as we can in the classroom. CDC guidelines right now for students in school, 3 feet, as you know. It'll be tough in some classrooms to achieve 3 feet of distance. We'll do the best we can with that. In most of our classrooms, though, class sizes generally are between 23 and 25 students. So in those classes, for the most part, we'll be able to achieve the 3 feet of distance. Lunch is a much greater concern, and several of you begun to think about that. What happens at lunch? At lunch, we have a cafeteria. In order to efficiently feed lunch to 1,500 students in a reasonable window of time, which we use 2 hours to do it, 4 lunch shifts, a little under 400 people in a cafeteria at a time. The fire marshal's capacity on our building, on our cafeteria, is 400. That has more to do with egress than it does how close people are in the room. But still, that's pretty tight. So we've made a decision that we'll be utilizing one of our gymnasiums. We have built our master schedule so that the gymnasiums are not fully occupied during the lunch shifts. At least initially, as we get the school year started, we're going to set up 3 spaces for students to eat. Seniors have always had the privilege to eat outside on the senior patio. Got numerous dozens of picnic tables outside, and they'll be able to go outside on days that the weather is appropriate for that and enjoy eating outside. Some students will be able to sit in our cafeteria, and in one of our gyms, we'll set up an auxiliary cafeteria. So we'll have, in each of those spaces, outside, maybe on a lunch shift, given lunch shift, maybe 75 students. In the cafeteria, maybe 200 instead of 400. And in the one of the gyms, another 100, 150. So we're going to need to do that because that's our most vulnerable time. I think we all recognize that. Students are unmasking, they're chomping, they're spitting, they're, slobbering and laughing and having a great time. I hope we certainly want that kind of environment in our school, but the masks are off, so it's a more vulnerable time. So we're going to spread out as much as we possibly can during lunch. And I feel pretty good about how far we can spread out. We can get pretty good and spread out. That being said, talking about distancing now, I just want to say, I'm going to be trying to set a tone with our staff as they return tomorrow that we are blessed with an 87-acre campus. I think a 250 to 300,000 square foot building. We do not need to sit on top of one another at any point. Our theme about distancing is going to be simple. Get as distant from others as you possibly can in the circumstances you are in. In the classroom, in the cafeteria, maybe it's going to be tougher than some other places, but get as much distance as you possibly can. We're going to be asking every adult, every student to choose distance. And I can already see, as our athletic teams have returned for the past couple of weeks in our marching band, that's not where our adolescents, in their excitement to be with one another and back on the campus, that's not on the forefront of their mind. So we're going to be working routines there to ask for their cooperation for their own health and safety, as well as their enjoyment. I don't think any of our students want to find themselves in a distance learning experience again this year. As a matter of fact, out of our nearly 1,500 students, we have 6. We have 6 who've applied and been approved for distance learning instead of in-person learning. So that makes a powerful statement to me about your commitment as a community to us getting back to business in in-person learning. And I know your presence here tonight signals you're also serious about making sure that's going to be a safe endeavor. So we are going to expect, and I'm going to use the word demand, although it'll be done with the highest possible degree of respect. We will be expecting students to wear masks properly. There's science behind this. We will literally teach the science. We want our students to understand we're not asking them to make sure that they are wearing a tightly fitting mask over their nose and their mouth because we want to be evil. In fact, I can't stand the mask because it's important to me to know and call by name each and every student in our school. I got to tell you, with 400 sophomores, many of whom I've never met personally, or maybe met them once, and 400 new freshmen that maybe I've met once. It's going to be a real challenge for us to, as a staff, to even recognize our students under those masks. So I don't like the masks, don't get me wrong. But if we're going to wear them to keep ourselves safe, and we certainly are by order of the governor and decision of our superintendent, we're going to wear them properly. A question was asked prior to the meeting through the Google Meet, Google form link that we sent out. What happens if people don't wear the masks? Nothing happens if you don't wear the mask. You have to wear the mask. It has to cover your mouth and it has to cover your nose. Otherwise, the mask is ineffectual in stopping air molecules, obviously, from escaping your respiratory system and possibly getting into the respiratory system of a nearby person. You know, the science of this is that COVID-19, you can be sick and infected with it for days, weeks, and not become symptomatic the whole time, making other people sick, whether you've been vaccinated or not. While it's rare for the vaccinated, it does happen. So that's why the mask is important. We will insist, we'll teach the mask, we'll teach it kindly, we'll teach it directly, we'll focus on the science. If you got to have the thing on, make sure it's doing its full work on your behalf. Mostly the mask is for others. It's a kind thing to do for the rest of us. So we'll be wearing masks, we'll be wearing them properly. If a student's really struggling with that, we'll probably reach out to you as parent and ask for your help with it. Air quality is huge. That's our next point. Air quality is huge. So Loudoun County Public Schools has invested a lot in making the air quality in our buildings the best it can be, far cleaner than in March of 2020. In fact, as I was leaving the building today, I saw boxes and boxes and boxes of brand new filters that have been delivered. And those filters are going to replace the filters that are currently in our portable classroom level air purifiers. Every single space in the school, save the gymnasium and the auditorium, which are almost like being outside, has a portable air quality control filter. And they're all getting new filters here before we start school. In addition to that, the filtering system throughout the buildings have been upgraded by Loudoun County Public Schools to a higher standard. So we're trying to keep that air clean because that's key to stopping the spread of COVID-19. Hand washing and sanitizing, we're going to have sanitizer everywhere. Many thanks to Home Depot. Home Depot sent us, go over to Sterling Home Depot and tell them you love them. They dropped off so much hand sanitizer. We'll have it everywhere. And we'll just be encouraging students to make good choices. Keep your hands clean is a big strategy to keep us safe. All right, let's go to the next screen, if you don't mind, Mrs. Comey. On this second slide, we're going to address a different issue, and that is what we just talked about a moment ago is how we keep from getting sick. But the fact of the matter is, once we get sick, once somebody gets sick, we've got to respond to that. And our health plan for everybody in the school recognizes that just like last year, we can be 100% that we will have staff, students, and family members of students who are going to get sick with COVID-19 in the next couple of weeks. It's going to happen. The key is that we don't want an infected person coming to school and infecting others while at school. So last year, what happened is we repeatedly had individuals getting sick at a birthday party that they went to, on a vacation, or just because somebody in their family caught it at work and brought it home. We were able to identify those individuals quickly, identify all the close contacts of those individuals immediately. That's our protocol at a school-based level. As soon as we find out there's a student who's sick, even if we're not certain that it's COVID-19, we immediately, same day, our leadership team interacts with the teachers of that student, identifies every student who's a close contact. We're, of course, trying to arrange our classrooms so we don't have any close contacts. Almost every time last year, we could honestly say we had none. That'll be tougher this year. We don't contact trace, but we have trained contact tracers on the staff at Dominion and throughout Loudoun County Public Schools. So contact tracing is a more sophisticated process that requires training. It's the contact tracers that determine who needs to quarantine. My role as the principal is to lead our staff to identify the individuals who are close enough that their contact with an infected individual needs to be traced, and a determination needs to be made as to whether or not that student should be returning to the building. Once a student or an athlete or a band member is identified as a close contact, they quarantine until we determine whether or not they in fact are at risk of developing COVID-19 and spreading it to others. So if a student is sick or a student has been exposed to someone who is sick and has been determined through contact tracing to be at risk, they are quarantined from school for specific periods of time. The documentation that we follow is pages long in terms of different scenarios, but typically a person sick with COVID-19 must quarantine for 10 days before returning, and also demonstrate significantly reduced symptoms before returning to school. Contact actually has to quarantine longer. The close contact has to quarantine for 14 days. Reason being, if you're a close contact, you could be asymptomatic for days and then get sick. So that's the incubation period, an extended incubation period with this particular virus. Now, quarantines looked like this last year for us. Quarantines looked like an individual student getting sick in her home, has to stay home for that period of 10 days until she's better and she can safely return to school without exposing others to COVID-19. Sometimes that student is on an athletic team, and that athletic team has some athletes who have come into close contact with that particular infected person or exposed person. In that case, a group of people have to quarantine. And then we actually had some programs, several of them in the winter season and the fall season, that had to completely shut down for a period of 2 weeks. An entire program, athletic programs that had to shut down because of a vast number of individuals in the program being close contacts. Again, none of those close contacts ended up contracting COVID-19 from another student athlete at Dominion High School or a coach or a faculty member. That's where the quarantining comes in. So very, very important to note. This is so important. This next 90 seconds might be some of the most important stuff I'm going to say in this entire meeting. Based on the science and the extraordinarily rare occurrence of a vaccinated individual getting sick with COVID-19, it's one in 1,000, a little bit less than 1 person in 1,000 will become vaccinated, fully vaccinated person right now will become sick with COVID-19. So that's a very effective short-term vaccination. In the short term, this vaccination is extraordinarily effective. Therefore, with those odds, vaccinated individuals don't have to quarantine. So important to recognize that. If your Titan comes to school, another student gets sick in their marching band section, on their team, or in one of their classrooms, they're exempted from quarantining. I need to point out a couple of things about that. One is you have to prove their vaccination status. That's the only time at which you're going to need to tell us whether or not your Titan is vaccinated. If we've determined through contact tracing that they're a close contact, we're going to ask them to quarantine. We're going to expect you to quarantine. However, if you can produce the vaccination card or a statement from your doctor acknowledging that your Titan is fully vaccinated, then you're exempt from that. The same thing goes for staff. So again, vaccinated individuals can't just tell us and we take it on their word. We need the evidence. This is the other key thing I want to share, and then I'm going to dive in and respond to some of your questions. Last year, when we had quarantined individuals sent home, they could jump on a Google Meet and stay just about as engaged in the school experience as their peers in school. This year, with, as I already said, 98% of our students returning to the building, full classrooms of 24, 25 students, we're not going to be able to concurrently teach. So our teachers aren't going to be running Google Meets while they're trying to teach 25 kids in the classroom. If your Titan ends up getting quarantined because they're sick or because they've been around somebody else who is sick and they're not vaccinated, they're going to be out of school for a period of 2 weeks. And we're going to work our tails off to keep in contact with them and make sure they have access to their assignments. But they're going to have to do the work independently. Not going to be able to just jump on a Google Meet and interact with the teacher and the other students. So that's just important consideration as you think about vaccination status. At this point in time, I probably missed some of the questions that you gave me in the first before the meeting tonight. And I'll get back to all of those. We'll go through each of those and make sure we respond to those. But I've talked so much here. Like I said, I thought it'd take about 15 minutes. I took 25, so maybe even 30. So let me open up the chat here. I'm just going to click on the chat box and see if you want to pop some things in there. I'll be happy to try to respond to some of your chatted questions right now. While we're waiting for a couple of those to pop up, I'm just going to go dive into some that were submitted earlier. Hallway protocols. You didn't hear me say anything about hallway protocols. The science about COVID-19 is you end up being at risk if you are in the presence of an exposed or infected individual for a cumulative period of time, adding up to 15 minutes in a 24-hour period, and that you're in close contact with that person for a sustained period of time. In our hallways, we're moving, and we only have 5 minutes in between classes, and you can't stand around. You got to move. So our one mitigation strategy during class changes is you got to keep moving, which is our policy anyway. So hallways, we found, we had prepared lots of scenarios for hallways for the small number of students who returned to school last spring. We found we didn't really need to worry about that at all. That's the least of our worries, and I predict it'll be the least of our worries again this fall. Students will not need to carry their vaccination cards. Excellent question, Ms. Joyner. And we are not collecting them, but if we determine at some point during the school year that Andy has been exposed, then you'd present us with a copy of his vaccination card at that point in time, which would allow him to be exempt from quarantine. Schools will not be testing. Thanks for asking, Mr. Hooper, but no testing by the school. Let's see, could you please clarify, how do you define a close contact? CDC has guidelines about close contacts, and right now, oops, sorry about that. I have lost myself on the chat. What did I do? There we go. Okay, I'm back on it. Close contacts are individuals who have been in the presence of an infected or exposed individual, actually an infected individual, for 15 minutes or more in a 24-hour period. Closeness is defined currently as within a 3-foot circle. So we're actually, as you can imagine, in a classroom of 25 kids, let's say we've got a student somewhere in the room, anywhere in the room, who we find out is infected with COVID-19. A 3-foot radius around that student isn't very large. Out of those 25 kids, it's likely to only be 3 or 4 at the most who are in the range to be a close contact. So we're not really expecting to have situations where entire classrooms full of students are going to be quarantined. Masks, great question about masks. And I'm sorry, let me get back up to the top and just work down these questions in order here so I don't skip any. Senior early release at the end of the year. My understanding is if they are absent, they will not qualify for early release. Yeah, we've, for a long time now, senioritis sets in. It's a great question. Seniors lose motivation to do a lot of things, include come to school. So for the first 17 years of Dominion High School's history, we incentivize seniors coming to school by providing them with some opportunities, some bennies, if they would come to school really consistently. And I've heard for years a concern about seniors choosing to come to school sick because they wanted to make sure they got those bennies. A couple of benefits are not having to attend school all the way to the bitter end in June, and the coveted early release instead of an end of day study hall. We're obviously going to adjust our plan. Last year, we didn't do that at all. Last year, we didn't have the need to do that at all, obviously. Yes, we will certainly be making allowances for students who are sick, seniors who are sick, and having a lot more latitude with that for sure. Masks in physical education are going to be required when students are standing around. But my understanding of the guidance, and of course, I'll be checking it every day to make sure I understand it. It's pages and pages long of guidance. So my current understanding is that when students are running the mile, well, let me say it differently. That's not a very good scenario. They're running the pacer inside the gym. They're going to be able to take the mask off while they're running the pacer. While they're waiting their turn, they should pull the mask back up over their nose and mouth. Now, when they go outside to the track and they run the mile out, the mask comes off. There's no expectation that anybody's going to mask outside on school property at this point in time. Great question, Ms. Coppage, about 0 day. And the way 0 day works, so we've done 0 day 16 times with students and their parents being able to come together to each class. Our format is that we're on the move. Every 10 minutes, we're moving to a new location. And the one concern, obviously, that we're all going to have is in those 10-minute windows, we're going to have a lot more people in classrooms than we ordinarily would have on a day of school, maybe almost twice as many as typical. So yeah, we're thinking about that very much and contemplating whether or not 0 day should in fact be an opportunity for parents and students to come to school. So our contingency plan is this, and I don't love the contingency plan. So if we believe that health statistics and trends warrant and suggest that we can safely continue our past tradition, we will. But obviously the data right now is giving me a great deal of pause about whether or not that's the best approach. So if we need to adjust, and somebody asked a question about 0 day, 0 day is for every student, grade 9 through 12. We hope every single student will come on 0 day to get acquainted with their teachers and find out what their expectations are. This is not something that's just for 9th graders, it's for everybody. And parents, that goes for you too. Given that we will not be in any classroom more than 10 minutes, remember the definition of a close contact is you're within 3 feet of somebody for a sustained period of time of 15 minutes. Even with the crowded conditions we're going to have at 0 day with all parents and students, we shouldn't have anybody who meets that criteria because we're not lingering anywhere for that length of time. As many people as are going to be in the building, though, it is a risk. So if we have to pivot, here's our plan. We'll bring all of our students in next Wednesday for sure, 9:15. Wednesday, let's see, that's the 25th, right? 25th, Wednesday 25th at 9:15. We'll run them through 0 day that day. My hope is that parents, you'll be able to come with them for the reasons I just expressed. If that's not advisable, and I welcome your feedback about this, by the way. One thing I always feel like as the principal of your school, your Titan school, is that I should be your conscience. So you can help me make that decision by giving me feedback. Whatever decision I make, of course, you can always make the decision that's best for your family. If we decide to proceed and you're really not comfortable coming into such a crowded building, we respect if you can't make it that day. It is certainly very valuable, but it's also very much recoverable if you can't make it to 0 day. If we decide it's just too many people to have parents in the building with students, we will schedule a more traditional back to school night sometime in early September. I've already begun to look at the dates available to us. I got to be honest with you, they're all bad options. They're all bad options because we're back to normal with activities. The band and our athletic teams are rolling. They start to play games on Monday night against Potomac Falls. We got freshman football and field hockey against Potomac Falls on Monday. On Tuesday, a week from tonight, we host them in volleyball. Every single night's filled with an activity. So picking a day that minimizes how many parents are going to have a conflict is a bit of a challenge, which is one of the reasons we love the 0-day format, because it allows us to create the fewest possible conflicts for our students, for sure, and hopefully for you as parents as well, if you have enough notice that you can take time off of work. So that was a really long-winded answer to that question, but I want you to know there's probably only one other thing that I'm wondering in my mind, just how we're going to handle it and keep everybody safe. And I'll go right to that and say, on the second day of school, move from 0-day to the first day of school, move to the second day of school, Friday, August 27th. We are blessed because Potomac Falls is making the 2-mile drive over to Dominion to play us in football that night. We're going to have a pep rally at 3:15. We can't wait to have one. We haven't had one in 20 months. Can't wait to have one. We love to have them in the gym because it's loud, but it's too crowded in there for us to be 3 inches apart instead of 3 feet apart. So we're going to go to the stadium. We're going to go to the stadium to have that pep rally. It'll also allow our kids to spread out. Remember, we had 87 acres. Let's spread out. We don't need to be on top of each other. And we can take our masks off out there. We'll have a tailgate party after school, 87 acres. We can spread out a lot. Stadium, a little tougher to spread out. So my other concern, of course, is we get our kids in D block. They like to jump all over each other and everything, and that's going to be tough. I guess one thing I would say for sure is I want to encourage students who are vaccinated to be at the football game. And I'm probably less enthusiastic for those students who haven't been vaccinated because their risk is so much greater of being in that mosh pit of other students and possibly getting infected. So those are my 2 things that I'm looking forward to next week, and just wondering, I want to be a good steward of the health and wellness of our staff and students in our community. So any feedback you have from me about that, I welcome it. Send me an email if you have strong feelings about it one way or another. I appreciate you asking that question, Ms. Coppage. Oh, let's see. Students be able to hydrate in class? Yes, they can hydrate in class. And what that basically means, you're going to slip your mask off and you're going to take a sip of water. The water bottles are a must. Please make sure you're sending your Titan to school with a water bottle. There are no water fountains from which they can drink. There are water bottle fill stations from which they can fill their water bottles, refill their water bottles. So please send them to school with a disposable or a permanent water bottle for sure. Again, hallways, we're going to be moving. We had signs all over the hallways in the spring saying, stay right and keep moving. We'll just keep preaching that. That worked very well for us. Yeah, supplies, the most important school supply these days is a Chromebook. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not a fan of screen time. I'm not a fan of screen time at all. So I do not expect in-person learning to be facing the Chromebook all the time. I expect the Chromebook to be a tool that will maximize learning, but I expect there to be a tremendous amount of interaction going on in the classroom. School supplies at the high school level are generally pretty simple. Some highlighters, pens and pencils, get some binders and paper. I know that doesn't have anything to do with COVID-19, but it's a really most popular question every year this time of year. So yeah, get your binders and everything. Teachers will disclose anything unique beyond binders and paper that they believe your Titan needs at the 0-day event. It's really difficult for us to put together a supply list because we have 140 staff members. You don't know which 7 you're going to get. They all teach such vast subjects. It's hard to put together a list for earth science. So it's just tough to produce a list, pretty much impossible. But you're not going to have to go all over Sterling trying to find really obscure things after 0-day to make sure your students have what they need. No, there won't be. Parker, that's a great question. Will the student at least be listening to a Google Classroom during quarantine? If somebody's quarantined, there is no Google Meet. Our teachers are not going to be logging into a Google Meet. They're going to be teaching kids face to face. So that's an excellent question, but there won't be an opportunity for that. Yeah, 0-day by grade level is really problematic for us because so many high school classes, that's a great suggestion, and we've thought about it, but so many classes cross grade levels. Hundreds of sections of classes go across grade levels. So it'd just be extremely taxing on the limited amount of time teachers have to prepare for instruction. they're at the school building 6 days before school begins, and we got really packed days. So United Mental Health Protocol is yeah, that's big. And our United Mental Health teams continue to grow in terms of the resources that we have. We have a couple of new members of that team. We're going to be checking in with every single student. We're going to have multiple adults doing brief check-ins with every single student during the first week of school. So we expect to be establishing relationships and putting the first fruit of our priority time into those relationships before we even worry a whole lot about whether we're teaching AP biology. We're going to be, first of all, making sure that we're working with students who are well from a social emotional standpoint. Thanks for asking about that. That's the forefront of our thinking right now. I'm going to go through some questions that were submitted in advance. I was asked if you can find out if teachers have been vaccinated. You can ask, and they may choose to tell you, but they don't have to. And I can ask, but they don't have to tell me. I don't know what percentage of our staff is vaccinated. I am fully vaccinated. I recommend everybody get fully vaccinated. Impression in my conversations with faculty is 99% of them are fully vaccinated. It makes all the sense in the world to them. I don't know for sure, but the vast majority of our staff for sure are fully vaccinated from what I can tell. I don't know the percentage. Band procedures, that's a place where there's some vulnerability. Our band's been in action now for 3 weeks. We haven't had an issue at this moment. It's probably right now, it's my biggest concern. We're blowing a lot of air molecules all over the place. Yesterday, of course, we had to be inside all day because it was sloppy. That's a concern. And we're trying to be as spread out as we possibly can. We are not using masks. We are not using instrument covers. That's a decision, a division-wide decision to go there. And that's not what we're doing. And we are trying to obviously be careful in other ways. Yeah, after school programs will follow all these same protocols. Yes, indeed. That's right. Distance, keep the mask on. The mask comes off only when you're involved in physical activity. Physical activity being you're playing an instrument, you're actually running the mile, not waiting your turn to do it. You're on the football practice field, actually in a play. If you're on the sideline, you should have your mask on. If you're debating, you can actually take your mask off to debate. It's an activity. So debaters have a lot of hot air to share. And we got a really good debate team. Let's see. I got some questions that don't have to do with COVID-19, and then we'll wrap up and let you go. Schedules. They're going to appear in student view tomorrow, Thursday, Friday at the latest. I want to confess, I'm a perfectionist when it comes to the schedule, and they're not perfect yet. So probably up until 0 day, I'm going to be perfecting it. I'm going to find a class that your Titan could be in that's a lot smaller than the one they're in now. I'm going to move them. Usually I do that for academic reasons, but this year I'm going to do it for safety reasons as well. So we got work to do on the master schedule, but it's 99.5% complete. We got cosmetic things to put on it right now to finish up, and you'll be able to see it in student view and parent view in the next couple of days. Let's see. PE locker rooms are going to be used. They are going to be used. We're gonna, again, we got 87 acres. Not all of it is locker room, but I'm just going to be asking our physical educators to be preaching to their students constantly. Don't be climbing all over each other in the locker room. Get yourself some space and work with as much space as you can. And to my knowledge, a question was asked, don't we have to meet some health measurements, some health markers to be in school in person? My understanding, and I'll confess that at my level in the organization, I'm not the one who reads state law, but state law was passed on July 1st that says we must provide in-person learning. So short of a state of emergency, again, by Governor Northam, we're going to be conducting in-person school for this year. There won't be any widespread closures of school unless Governor Northam does that. I don't think our superintendent even has the authority to do that under the law. I could be wrong. Again, I'm not the expert about this, What has to happen, of course, is that we have to put reasonable mitigation strategies in place, which is the purpose of tonight's meeting. And then secondly, obviously people have to quarantine if you have an outbreak in the building. So, we'll quarantine to the extent we have to. Could it be a situation where some school somewhere in the Commonwealth has, dozens? I think it's already happened, to be honest with you, where some schools, mostly elementary, they're much more vulnerable because of the vaccination problem at that age level. Where they're going to have dozens, if not hundreds of students and staff members quarantined, yes, but I don't think there's a threshold at which schools can actually close short of the governor making that decision. So again, not my area of expertise, but that's my understanding that we've been ordered to be open. So that's where we are right now as it stands. And I think that brings me to the end of every question I have seen. I really appreciate you coming. Mrs. Coma and I are going to scoot out of the call and get ready for our Spanish speakers who are going to join us at 8 p.m. I really appreciate your time and your interest in keeping our Titans safe. And I'm so excited. I know our staff is so excited to be back at work tomorrow, getting ready to get back at it in person. And we're going to be working really hard and really smart to keep your Titans safe. Have a great evening. Love you guys. Go Titans.